Okay. All right. Let's get going. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat study. Let me get rid of that video. That is, by the way, Duduk music, for those who are interested. And Duduk is an instrument that is traditionally played, I think, mostly in the Caucasus region, and it's very relaxing. So, Duduk music, if you ever want to listen to it. Okay, so let's see. Let me get rid of that. And let me share the screen a little bit of a different way. Okay, that should do it. So then we have, okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to start this week's Parsha. Again, we go by the rabbinical Parsha breakdown, the yearly Ashkenazi yearly cycle. Why? Not because it's canonical in any way, shape, or form, especially for us Karaites, but basically it was instituted by Hakham Yaakov ben Yisrael. He thought it would be a good idea to just stay synchronized with most of the Jewish world, to be more in tune or more relevant to what's going on. And so that's what we're doing. We've been doing it that way. So we stick with the weekly Parsha, but no one should think that this is in some way canonical, that this week has to be this Parsha. In the past, I've just kind of gone through the Torah at my own pace, or done certain sections that were relevant. And by the way, this is not the only Parsha calendar. The Sfaradim have a slightly different Parsha calendar. There are other ones. This is a 2-year cycle. This is a 3-year cycle, so it's a bit complicated. But the 1-year Ashkenaz cycle, again, to stay tuned, sync. Oops. Sometimes the internet here is not terrific. So if it kind of freaks out, then just wait patiently and hopefully it'll come back. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it. That's just the way it is. Okay, I'm going to grab a glass of water for 1 second. Excuse me. And then we'll dig into the Parsha. So what I've been doing in recent weeks is, by the way, if there's a problem with the sound, I'm using my headphones today because it makes the battery life on the computer run down more slowly, so I don't have to recharge so quickly. So if there's a problem with the sound, please let me know. This is the first time I'm using the headphones, but it should be fine. Okay. So what we've been doing in recent weeks is a morning study. I don't know where you are in the world, but here where I am, it's basically morning at this point. And an afternoon study. The morning study has been basically reading through the Parsha in Hebrew with very little commentary. I can't control myself. What can I say? Sometimes I have to comment, but for the most part, very little commentary. Just reading through the Parsha in Hebrew, only in Hebrew. And the reason that I decided to do this is because I'd noticed that when we don't do this in the studies, that sometimes we don't go through the Parsha. In fact, there's this phenomenon that I've always noticed over the years, even when I was back in yeshiva. I call it the chapter 1 phenomenon, where people will start reading something, a book in the Tanakh. I think the classic example might be the book of Esther. Leading up to Purim, people study the book of Esther. And what they do is they usually go through the first, second, third, fourth chapter. You know, they have like a shiur class at a yeshiva or with their local rabbi or something like that. And they'll start always with chapter 1. And they'll maybe get to chapter 2, or they usually don't get past that. And that's a shame. Well, maybe they get to chapter 5 or chapter 6, but they usually don't finish a study of it. Well, when they do the reading on Purim night and Purim day in the synagogues, of course they do the whole thing because they're just reading it. Okay. Well, I didn't want the phenomenon of the chapter 1 phenomenon, where if we deep right into the Parsha at the beginning, we're only going to get through the first couple of paragraphs of the first chapter, whatever the case may be. And so to avoid chapter 1, what would you call it? Chapter 1 fatigue, chapter 1 malaise, I don't know, problems with getting past through the entire Parsha, I decided to, from now on, or recently I decided a couple months ago, that in studies, first we read the entire Parsha, just in Hebrew, and then afterwards, in the afternoon study, we go back and we can get more deeply. It doesn't mean I won't stop time to time and make some comments, but for the most part, it's just going to be a straight reading through of the Parsha. Okay, so that said, everyone has a different level of Hebrew. Some people can read Hebrew, but not understand it. Some people can read it and understand it a bit. Some people can read it and understand it a lot. So depending on your level, you may want to read through in English or whatever your language is, whatever your native language is, or whatever language you wish, translation as we go through the reading in Hebrew, or you may want to try to follow along both in the Hebrew and in the English or whatever language. It's up to you. I'll try to call off the chapter and verse names frequently so everybody knows where we are. And that's it. So that being said, let's dig in. So we are starting now in Exodus chapter 10. And we're going to go through the middle of Exodus chapter 13. So let's just back up a little bit. Okay, we were in chapter 9. We got up to the 7th plague, hail. So things are starting to get pretty serious, right? The plagues are kind of increasing in intensity, right? If we go back and just make sure, I have to change the screen now. There we go. Okay. Now everyone should be able to see the screen. Yes. Okay. So, things start off real kind of like, I wouldn't say calm, but, Moshe's just playing with Pharaoh a little bit. In fact, the whole story of the Exodus, or the plagues leading up to the Exodus, is Moshe, or I should say Yehovah, God, and Aaron, messing with Pharaoh's mind, playing psychological games with Pharaoh. And one of my favorite statements, if I can find it, just give me 1 second here. I might be able to find it, or I might not. Should be here. Wait a second. It's going to be here. It's going to be the next chapter. 1 second. No, it's before this. Just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, it's Exodus, and I should remember this. I should mark this in my head as one of those verses that I always mark in my head, like Exodus 12:2 or Exodus 32:32. Am kashe oref, stubborn neck, stiff-necked nation, or various other verses that I just remember. Jeremiah 16:9. So I should mark this in my head always. Exodus 5:2. This is when Moses and Aaron first come and say, "Let my people go." Exodus 5:1. Shalach et ami yahogu li bamidbar. Said, "Let my people go," that they should make a holiday for me in the desert. Yomer Paro, and this, to me, I think this sums up the entire, I won't say the entire book of Exodus, because the book of Exodus do other things, but it sums up the entire theme of the Exodus. And I just love this this verse. Yomer Paro, and Paro said, "Mi Yehovah asher eshma b'kolo l'shalach et Yisrael lo yadati et Yehovah v'ram et Yisrael lo ashaleach." Okay, and Pharaoh says, "Who is Yehovah that I should listen to his voice? That I should listen to him to send and let Israel go?" Okay, I don't know. I've never known this Yehovah. I don't know Yehovah, and I'm not going to let Israel go. Okay? Pharaoh's first response is, "Who is Yehovah?" Okay, I can't say guy. God. You know, I've never heard of this God before, and now you're coming to me and you're saying this God is telling you to let an entire people that I am worried about them going, or I rely on. I don't know. Rely on that or slave labor. Actually, doesn't say that. He starts enslaving them afterwards, but you know, that I don't want them to go. I'm afraid that they're going to go and join my enemies and you know, go up out of the land and join my enemies in war against me. I've never heard of this Yehovah, and I'm not going to let the people go. Okay, why is this such a pivotal phrase? Because the whole process of the Exodus, the whole process of the plagues leading up to the Exodus, is that Pharaoh is going to know exactly who Yehovah is. Right now, he arrogantly, in his arrogance, says that, "Who is Yehovah? I don't know who this Yehovah is. I don't know who this God of Israel is." But he is going to know very well who this God of Israel is, because this God of Israel is going to come, decimate, destroy, and flatten his kingdom to the ground. And his arrogance, right? Remember, the Egyptian gods, they proclaim themselves, they believe themselves to be gods. Okay, he is going to be humbled before this God who he now claims he doesn't know. Okay, God Yehovah, our God Yehovah, whom he claims he doesn't know. Process. So that's why I love this phrase so much, because by the end, Pharaoh, arrogant figure who believes he's a god, to a whimpering little baby whose entire kingdom is destroyed by Yehovah, this God who's much more powerful than he is, this God who he claims he doesn't know, and this God who, on a number of occasions, he begs Moshe to pray, Moshe and Aaron to pray to this God for his own salvation. So he's going to go from not knowing Yehovah to begging to this God to bless him and to relent from attacking him. And this happens in stages, right? It's not just that it's not just that God comes along and says, whoop, one plague, gone out of Egypt, right? He consistently knocks Pharaoh down, right? He escalates his attack against Pharaoh. And each time when Pharaoh refuses, the attack escalates to the next level. Okay, so he's messing with this guy psychologically. He's playing with his mind, okay, by showing his power, by ramping up his power with each plague. And you see Pharaoh struggling, right? He's struggling with this dilemma he has. On the one hand, he wants to continue saying, Israel, who is Yehovah that I should listen to him to let Israel go? And on the other hand, his entire world is being decimated around him until finally he has no choice but to relent, to surrender in complete, abject defeat, and proclaim the name of Yehovah as the great God who has come and destroyed his nation. It's a shame that people have to be smacked around by God, or smacked around sometimes to wake up and to realize the truth. But Pharaoh had a hard and heavy heart, right? Sometimes it says his heart was hardened. Sometimes it says his heart was made heavy. We spoke about the significance in Egyptian lore of a heavy heart, which the Torah may or may not be referring to, but we mentioned it last week. We'll probably mention it again this week. But his heavy, hardened heart was broken to pieces in stages until he turned from this arrogant king over one of the greatest kingdoms of the time into a whimpering baby whose entire world had been destroyed and decimated around him through his arrogance and through his refusal to recognize the true God of the world, Yehovah. Okay. So that being said, so we saw that things lead up, right? Things get progressively more intense. Okay, Pharaoh is it's almost like, it reminds me of what's the show? The $64,000 question back in its day, or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? At any time, as the questions get harder and harder, and as the stakes get higher and higher, the person who's in the in the hot seat can choose to take the money and run, right? He can stop at whatever it is, $20,000 or $40,000 or $80,000, or it's up to the $1 million, right? And he can take the money and run, and the game is over, okay? Or he can, have the heat turned up on him to the next level. There's more risk, and there's more reward. Well, it's the same with Pharaoh, right? At any point, Pharaoh could have just taken the money and run. He could have said, okay, I got it. All right, this Yehovah guy, I keep on saying guy, sorry, God. This Yehovah God is more powerful than I am, okay? I want to save my own butt. I want to save my own family. I want to save my own kingdom. So that's it. I'm just going to take the money and run. I got it. Blood, frogs, cattle disease, or whatever it is conscious to what it means. I get the idea. You win. Let me have my kingdom, and Israel can go and move my life. Okay, but he can't do that, right? Because he's arrogant. Because his heart is hardened and his heart is heavy. So he's got to push it to the limit. He can't admit that there's another God out there that's more powerful, because he believes that he is God, right? That's what the Egyptian pharaohs believed. They believed that they were God, and they were part of the pantheon of Egyptian gods, powerful gods who are part of the most powerful and enlightened and advanced kingdom in the entire world. And for him to admit that would be to forsake his entire worldview, which it's very difficult, we all know, for any person to forsake their entire worldview, especially when it's wound up, unfortunately, as so often is, in arrogance and ego and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just as hard here for Pharaoh to do the same, right? He can't admit that there's any God more powerful than himself and the Egyptian pantheon. But God is more powerful. Yehovah is more powerful, and slowly but surely breaks him down until he again turns from the godlike king into a whimpering little baby whose entire world has been destroyed around him. And again, this is done, as we said, in stages. Each time it's ramped up a bit more. So we start with actually things going in Pharaoh's direction. I spoke about this last week. I'm not going to repeat it. We mentioned the laws of physics, how things have to move in a certain direction before they can turn around in the other direction. And so when Moshe and Aaron first come, things don't get better. They say, "Let my people go," and they show their little trick with the snake and all this kind of stuff. Actually, no, they don't do that until later. That Pharaoh makes things worse and not better. And God at this point says, just hold on, okay? And that's right here, Exodus 6:1. ויאמר יהוה אל משה, אתה תראה את אשר אעשה לפרעה, כי ביד חזקה ישלחם, וביד חזקה יגרשם מארצו. And God said to Moses, now you'll see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. Because with a strong hand, he will send away, he will then go, biyad hazakah, and with a strong hand, he will chase them out of the land. Okay, but first what happens, as we said, is that Pharaoh makes the situation worse. He says the Israelites have to produce the same amount of bricks, but they have to gather their own tevin, their own straw. So things are not going in the right direction at first, but that quickly turns around and it starts accelerating in the other direction. Again, if we look at it as like the laws of physics, okay, the train was moving in this direction, okay, in a certain direction. This is Pharaoh's direction. Oh, this is working. Hold on a second. Whoops. Where am I? I'm not even on the screen. I should be on the screen. Okay. The train was moving in this direction. This is Pharaoh. Moses comes along and starts to put the brakes on it, says, let my people go. But the train still has momentum. It's still going to move. Oops, start over here. It's still going to move in this direction. It's got to slow down, stop, and then Moshe's force, God's force, is going to start pushing it in the opposite direction, and it's going to go faster and faster and faster and accelerate until boom, Exodus. That's the laws of physics, and that's a kind of, I would say, I don't like to say metaphysical explanation, because I don't really like the word metaphysical or spiritual or stuff like that, but I call it spiritual cosmology. That's the spiritual cosmology of the world. Things go in a certain direction, and then the opposing force has to first slow them down before it can go back in the opposite direction and accelerate in the opposite direction. So that's a kind of a physical or a spiritual cosmology explanation of why when Moses and Aaron first came to Pharaoh, that things actually got worse before they got better. And that's why things always get worse before they get better. That's why people have to, in their life, sometimes hit rock bottom before they can turn around and go in the other direction. Okay. Yeah. So that's that. And once things start going in the opposite direction, we see, as in the case of the plagues, they don't just move along steadily; they accelerate. Right? Each plague is successively worse. It's exponential. Okay. There's this idea of exponential growth, which is in simple terms, wherever you are determines how fast you're going to be moving to the next stage. Okay, so as things progressively get worse, it doesn't just go like this. Oops, it goes like this. It's exponential, right? Each plague is exponentially worse than the previous plague, until finally Pharaoh's entire kingdom is destroyed, and that's almost like a pregnancy, one could say, like the bubble bursts, and out goes Israel from this place called Egypt. Okay, I don't know. That's my spiritual cosmology explanation of the situation. Hope you like it. So that being said, and a lot more to say about that. That being said, we then dig into the plagues. So so before the first plague, Aaron kind of gives, oh God, there's so much I could say about it. And I said I wasn't going to get into interpretation now, but very quickly, I'll finish this in 5 minutes, I promise, right? Aaron gives kind of a little show of God's power, right? He makes his staff turn into a serpent, and And Pharaoh is not impressed, right? He's got his Egyptian magicians who, again, represent the power of Egypt, who represent the gods of Egypt, who represent the society, the entire light world view of Egypt and its pantheon of gods and its power and its empire and all this kind of stuff. And they could do the same thing. And Pharaoh basically says, not impressed, Moshe and Aaron. Okay. Well, then we start with the plagues. And the first plague, again, Pharaoh is not impressed. The Egyptian magicians are able to imitate that first plague, right? And it says here in Exodus chapter 7, verse 22, and the Egyptian magicians did the same with their secret arts. And we saw last week in the Aleppo Codex that in one place this does, not in the Aleppo Codex, it was in the Leningrad Codex, that this word appears up above as lahatehem, which here appears as latehem. Up here it appears as latehem, here it appears as latehem, but at any rate, and Pharaoh's heart became hard, strong actually, and hard. And he didn't listen to them as he didn't listen to what God had spoken, basically. Okay, so Pharaoh is not impressed. His magicians can imitate the same thing, so he's still given the excuse to himself and I guess to the people around him. Right? It always mentions his avadim, his servants, there's no reason to take this seriously. However, I have a feeling that what the Egyptian magicians were able to do was not exactly the same as Moshe and Aaron. Okay, and so I think what's going on here is, and we saw that even with the when Aaron's staff becomes a serpent, right? We saw that yes, the Egyptian magicians were able to somehow, I think just through, a magician could pull a rabbit out of a hat. So they're able to do this little parlor trick where they turn their staffs into serpents as well. But what happened in the end is that Aaron's serpent ate all of the rest of the serpents, swallowed all the rest of the serpents. And that's here in Exodus chapter 7, verse 12. Each person turned his staff into a snake. And Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs, meaning when they were in the forms of snakes. And that gave excuse for Paro, okay, and Pharaoh's heart became hardened. Each time his magicians are able to imitate the trick, then Pharaoh's heart is hardened. But if we pay attention, really, round one, if we call it round zero, right? The first plague is blood. It was round zero where Aaron turns his staff into a serpent. Really, Moshe and Aaron won round one, right? Because their snakes swallowed the Egyptian magicians' snakes. Okay, so really, round one, ding, Aaron and Moshe. But Pharaoh didn't want to see that. Okay, a man sees as what he wants to see and disregards the rest. Say Simon Garfunkel in the song The Boxer. And I'm a big Simon and Garfunkel fan for the simple reason that my mother went to high school with Simon and Garfunkel and they were friends. Okay, little irrelevant fact. Okay, so at any rate, where were we? Yes. Right. So we're saying that Moses and Aaron actually won round one because their snakes swallowed the rest of the snakes. And if Pharaoh had wanted to, at that point, he could have realized, okay, I got it. These guys are actually stronger than I am. Yehovah is stronger than Ra, the sun god, the main god in the pantheon of Egypt, and stronger than I am. And okay, I'll let the people go, and that's it. But he doesn't. His heart was hardened. His heart was hardened. Okay, and in each case, we see again that in some way, well, that the fact that Moses and Aaron won round one implies that the rest of the plagues that they actually won those rounds as well. Even though it says in the case of, let's say, the blood, right, the first plague, it says again in verse 22, the verse we just read, that the Egyptian magicians were also able to somehow recreate the plague of blood. I have a feeling, even though there's not any evidence for it here in the direct evidence here in the text, that also what the Egyptian magicians were able to do was much less than what Aaron, Moshe, or Yehovah through Aaron and Moshe were able to do. Right? In the case of Aaron and Moshe, it says everything, all of the waters turned into blood. Let's find where it says that. Come on, Radagash, a bit on. One second. I can do it right now. 1 second. You ready? Look at you. Sounds. Here it is. Okay. So in verse 19, Exodus chapter 7, verse 19, it says, "Vayomer Yehovah el Moshe, Yehovah said Moshe, Emor Aaron, say to Aaron, Kach makcha, take your staff, unatei yadcha al mimei Mitzrayim, and stretch your hand out over the waters of Egypt. Al naharotam, al yorehem, ve'al agamehem, ve'al kol mikweh mimehem." Okay, so it's not just on the Nile River; it says on all of their streams, on all of their rivers, on all of their ponds or lakes, and on any gathering of water, any body of water. Okay, dam, hayad dam, b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, uba'etzim uba'avanim, and there was blood all over the land of Egypt, including on the trees and on the stones. The whole place was a giant bloodbath. Okay, now it says here again in verse 22 that the Egyptian magicians were able to do the same thing, but I don't think they were able to do the same thing. I think probably what happened is they were able to turn a bowl of water to blood, right? And then again, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He had a hard heart. He was stubborn. He was arrogant, right? So he said, "That's enough. I see my Egyptian magicians can, do the same kind of thing. They can turn water into wine. I mean blood, and they can, so they can do exactly the same thing. And so I don't have to listen to you, Moshe, and Aaron." Well, as things progress, get progressively worse. Okay, so in the case of the frogs, the Egyptian magicians are able to do the same thing. Let's find that. So now things are ramping up. I said exponentially, it's getting exponentially, the spinning out of control. We could say in simple terms. Okay, and let's just find this as well. One second. Here in Exodus chapter 8, verse 7. So this is now the plague of the frogs. Ya'asuchen hatumim achartumim be latem ya'alu et atzfardaim al eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, so again, the Egyptian magicians were able to recreate the frog act, which again, who knows, maybe a frog jumped out of a pond somewhere, and Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened, who was arrogant, said, "Okay, that's enough. I get it. My guys can do the same thing. Game over." And that was allowed him to harden his heart. Okay, but finally, in the third plague, the kinim, the gnats, or the lice, it says here in verse 18, same verse, the Egyptians did, the magicians did the same with their secret arts. Let's see, etakinim, to make gnats or flies or fleas or or lice come out. V'lo yicholu. One second here. ויעשו כן החתומים בלעתיהם ולהוציא את הכינים ולא יאכלו ותהי הכינים קינם באדם ובבהמה יאמרו החתומים אל פרעה. Okay, I'm sorry. They could try to do it here. Okay, ויעשו כן החתומים בלעתיהם. Okay, להוציא את הכינים ולא יאכלו ותהי הכינם באדם ובבהמה. So here they tried to do it. It says they did it. Okay, but as we know, the imperfect or the we'll call it the imperfect mood does not always express what they will do or what they did. It could express what they intended to do, and that's the case here. Okay, they tried to do is what the verse is saying here. Or they did the whoop, the little act, but they couldn't do it. Okay, and the Egyptians said, "Etzba Elohim hi." Okay, this is the finger of God. Okay, this is the finger of God. So finally, in the third plague, the Egyptians, they try to recreate the plague, try to recreate the trick, but they can't do it, and they say, "This is the finger of God." Okay, they don't say Elohim, they don't say Yehovah, they say Elohim. This is the finger of God, and this pisses Pharaoh off. This upsets Pharaoh, and so his heart is hardened again for a different reason. This time he doesn't have the Egyptian magicians to rely on, who were able to replicate the third plague, but he either his heart just already hard, which we know it was, or maybe the fact that they couldn't do it, maybe that pissed him off even more. And so he didn't listen to them and let them go. Okay, so the next plague we have with him, okay, his servants and his people, okay, and also sometimes the houses, okay. So on you, your servants and your people, and on your houses, okay, which is translated, we saw in many different ways. I think Robert Alter translated it as the horde, and I think he said it was maybe just a horde of different animals. I'd have to remember exactly what his translation was. But to make a long story short, we don't know exactly what ha'erov is. Often it's translated as swarms, okay? But we don't know exactly what it is. Okay, so and again, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and so that was the fourth plague. One second. So then Pharaoh kind of relents. ויקרא פרעה אל משה ואהרון יאמר לכו זבחו לאלוהיכם בארץ. Okay, worship in the land, and of course they say they can't. הן נזבח את תועבת מצרים לעיניהם ולא יסכלונו. Okay, they said we're going to be we would be sacrificing the abomination of Egypt, which ostensibly would be sheep, and how can we do that? And they wouldn't stone us. Okay, so then it goes on. We have the fifth plague, which is the hold on 1 second, please. I'll be right back. Never unmuted the mic. Darn. Okay. So now in Exodus 12, we have really what is considered the first commandment. Even though I don't know if it's really a commandment, it's more like a statement, but you can consider it the first commandment, and that's Exodus 12:2. The implications of Exodus 12:2, and I have to change this again as well. Apologies. Let's go back like this. There we go. I had the microphone off, and I had the settings wrong. Sorry about that. Okay, so Exodus 12:2 is, of course, a sentence with great importance to Qaraites. Okay, החודש הזה לכם ראש חדשיהם, ראשון הוא לכם לחדשי שנה. Okay, this month is for you. The head of the months is the first for you of the months of the year. Okay, anyone who's into Qaraism at all understands the great importance of this verse. I'm not going to belabor it here right now, but of course the rabbis believe that the first month, although they have, according to the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Perek 1, Mishnah 1, of course they have apparently 4 New Years, but their main New Year is in the fall, and we as Karaites give no credence whatsoever to that New Year. Okay, here we know that we count the months, and that our New Year is in the spring and only in the spring. Okay, verse 1, ויאמר יהוה אל משה ואל אהרון בארץ מצרים לאמור החודש הזה, verse 2, לכם ראש חדשים, ראשון הוא לכם לחדשי השנה. דברו אל כל עדת ישראל לאמור בעשור לחודש הזה, ויקחו להם איש שא לבית אבות, שא לבית, ואם ימעט הבית מאות משא, ולקח הוא ושכנו הקרוב אל ביתו במכסת נפשות איש לפי אכלו, תחוסו על השא. שא תמים זכר בן שנה יהיה לכם מן הכבשים ומן העזים תיקחו. והיה לכם למשמרת עד 14 יום לחודש הזה, שחטו אותו כל קהל עדת ישראל בין 40. Passover sacrifice. Verse 7, ולקחו מן הדם ונתנו על שתי המזוזות, על שקוף, על הבתים אשר יאכלו אותה בהם. ויאכלו, אכלו את הבשר בלילה הזה, צלי אש ומצות על מרונים יאכלוהו. אל תאכלו ממנו נע ובשל בושל במים, כי אם צלי אש ראשו על קרעיו ועל קרבו. Verse 10, ולא תותירו ממנו עד בוקר, ונותר ממנו עד בוקר באש תשרפו. וככה מתניכם חגורים, נעליכם ברגליכם, מקלכם בידכם, ואכלתם אותו בחיפזון, פסח הוא ליהוה. עברתי בארץ מצרים בלילה הזה, והכיתי כל בכור בארץ מצרים, מאדם עד בהמה, ובכל אלוהי מצרים יעשה שפטים, אני יהוה. Verse 13, והיה הדם לכם לאות על הבתים. Ot is always some kind of physical sign. Sometimes by extension it's not a physical sign, but in its basic meaning, when you see the word ot, there's some kind of physical thing you can see or look at or hear or smell that symbolizes something, that proves something, we could say. הבתים אשר אתם שם, וראיתי את הדם, פסחתי עליכם, ולא יהיה בכם נגף למשחית, בחקותי בארץ מצרים. Verse 14. And we discussed this so many times in previous studies. I usually go through these verses extensively around Passover time, which is coming pretty soon actually. Okay, verse 14. יהיה היום הזה לכם לזיכרון, וחג אותם אותו חג ליהוה לדורותיכם, חוקת עולם תחגוהו. 7 ימים מצות תאכלו, אך ביום הראשון תשביתו שאור מבתיכם. כל אוכל חמץ, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא ישראל מיום הראשון עד יום השביעי. Let's see something myself. Verse 16. וביום הראשון מקרא קודש, וביום השביעי מקרא קודש. יהיה לכם כל מלאכה לא יעשה בהם, אך אשר יאכל לכל נפש הוא לבדו יעשה לכם. Verse 17. שמרתם את המצוות כי בעצם היום הזה הוצאתי את צבאותיכם, your hosts, your armies, right? Israel is often likened to an army. מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את היום הזה לדורותיכם, חוקת עולם. Verse 18. בראשון, ב14 יום לחודש בערב תאכלו מצות עד יום ה21 לחודש בערב. Verse 19. 7 ימים שאור לא ימצא בבתיכם, כי כל אוכל מחמצת. ונכרתה הנפש ההיא בעדת ישראל, בגר ובאזרח הארץ. מחמצת לא תאכלו, בכל מושבותיכם תאכלו מצות. Verse 21. ויקרא משה לכל זקני ישראל ויאמר עליהם, משכו, קחו לכם צאן במשפחותיכם, שחטו הפסח, ולקחתם אגודת אזוב, היספ, טבלתם בדם אשר בסוף סף, הגעתם אל המשקוף ואל שתי מזוזות. מן הדם אשר בסף, ואתם לא תצאו איש מפתח ביתו עד בוקר. Verse 23. עבר יהוה לנגוף את מצרים, וראה את הדם על המשקוף ועל שתי המזוזות. פסח יהוה על הפתח ועל ייתן המשחית לבוא אל בתיכם לנגוף. Verse 24. שמרתם את הדבר הזה לחוק לך ולבניך עד עולם, והיה כי תבואו אל הארץ אשר ייתן יהוה לכם. שמרתם ושמרתם את העבודה הזאת, היה כי יאמרו עליכם בניכם, מה העבודה הזאת לכם? ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא ליהוה, שפסח על בתי בני ישראל במצרים, ונחפו את מצרים, ואת בתינו הציל, ויקוד העם וישתחוו. One second here. And verse 28. ילכו ויעשו בני ישראל כאשר ציווה יהוה את משה ואהרון, כן עשו. Verse 29. What's that? What? Yeah, just do it quietly, okay? Verse 29. ויהי בחצי הלילה. חצי הלילה is the same as the phrase we saw before. Let me just see, find here. I'm not gonna look for that. Okay, later on in the analysis. ויהי בחצי הלילה יהוה ייקח כל בכור בארץ מצרים, ובכור פרעה היושב על כיסאו, עד בכור השביעי אשר בבית הבור, וכל בכור בהמה, including one of the behema, which is important, right? We have to sacrifice the firstborn of our animals to Yehovah. ויקם פרעה לילה הוא וכל עבדיו וכל מצרים, ותהי צעקה גדולה במצרים, כי אין בית אשר אין שם מת. So that's it, firstborn. It's almost anticlimactic, right? It's not described in detail. There's no blood, there's no gore. It's just done real quick, right? Everything was the build up to this. And then when it happens, it's kind of, right? It's not described in any great detail. It's just right? The lead up to it, what's going to happen that we saw in the previous chapter is much longer, is much greater in length than the actual description of the plague itself. Verse 31, ויקרא למשה ולאהרון לילה. ויאמר קומו איתי גם אתם, גם בני ישראל, ולכו עבדו את יהוה כדברם ידברכם. גם סודכם, גם תברכו אשר דיברתם, לכו וברכתם גם אותי. So let's compare this. We'll do it later. When Pharaoh said originally, I don't know who this Yehovah is, and I'm saying, excuse me, do it, Yehovah. Go. Worship Yehovah. As you've spoken. Gam tzolchem, gam berkechem. Complete surrender. Complete abject surrender to Moshe and Aaron, and of course the Yehovah. Also your flocks, and also your herds. Chu kasher dibartem. Take as you requested, as you spoke. Lechu verachtem gam oti. And go and bless, and also bless me. Now Pharaoh, who says, I don't know who Yehovah is, and I'm not going to listen to him, and I'm not going to send the people, send the children of Israel, is now saying, do everything you said you wanted to do. Go, take everything, your children, your flocks, everything. Go worship God in the Yehovah in the desert, and have him bless me as well. So now he goes from not even knowing who this Yehovah is to, after his entire nation is completely decimated and destroyed, knowing exactly who Yehovah is, and even asking Moses and Aaron to pray for him, to pray to Yehovah for him. وتخزق مصرائيم على العام. This is this word تخزق. למהר לשלחם, right? This is harden, right? It means pressured. Okay. But I wonder if the use of this word here is intentional, right? Because Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And here it says, the Egypt pressured the people, meaning the people of Israel, to hurry up. And to send them away from the land. Because they said, we're all going to die. They thought, they saw the first bed, and they thought, well, next he's coming for all of us. They didn't realize, right? There was no internet in that day. I guess each person didn't realize that it was only the firstborn. Well, maybe they did because it had been announced in advance. But at any rate, they fear they're all going to die now. terem יחמץ משרתם צרורות בשמלתם על שכמם. And this also, of course, has great, I wouldn't say great, but this has importance for charism, and specifically with relation to the rabbinical idea that matzot has to be made in under 18 minutes. Okay. I'll read that one again. חזק מצרים על העם למהר לשלחה מן הארץ כי אמרו כולנו מתים וייסח העם את בצקו טרם יחמץ משרותם צרורות בסמלותם על שכמם. Verse 35, בני עשו כדבר משה, וישאלו ממצרים כלי כסף, כלי זהב ושמלות. יהוה נתן את חיי העם בעיני מצרים, וישאלום ינצלו את מצרים. Verse 37, ויעשו בני ישראל מרמסס סוכותה. So the first place they go is to Sukkot. כ600,000 רגלי הגברים לבד מטף. So when Abraham, was it Abraham? I'm trying to remember now. I'm gonna have to look it up afterwards. Wait, let me look it up right now. Yeah. So it's Yaakov, Genesis 33. One second. I should have done this in a different tab. Right, that's what it is. Go to 17. ויאמר עשיו אציגה נא עמך מן העם אשר איתי ויאמר למה זה אמצא חן בעיני אדוני וישב ביום ההוא עשיו בדרכו שעירה, so עשיו went to שעיר ויעקב נשא סוכותה ויבן לו בית ולמקנהו עשה סוכות על כן קרא שם המקום סוכות. So we'll talk about this later, but this couldn't possibly be the same Sukkot. Because at this point, if we trace Yaakov's journey, he's coming from Padam Aram back down ultimately to Beersheba to reunite with Yitzhak. And this Sukkot, whatever it is going to be Egypt, obviously, right? It's within walking distance of Ramses. They left Ramses and came to Sukkot. So it's clear that we're talking about different places named Sukkot, but we'll talk about this later. Hopefully, if we have time. Okay, כ600,000 רגלי הגברים לבד מטף, verse 38. גם ערב רב עלה איתם, ושאון בקר מקנה כבד מאוד. So ערב רב, oh boy. There's a lot to say about that, and we will. Verse 39, ויפו את הבצק אשר הוציאו ממצרים עוגות מסות כי לא חמץ כי גורשו ממצרים ולא יכלו להתממע גם צידה לא עשו להם. Okay. ומשה בני ישראל אשר ישבו במצרים 30 שנה ו400 שנה. So Israel was in Egypt for 430 years, it says here. Well, we'll talk about that later. ויהי מקץ 30 שנה ו400 שנה, ויהי בעצם היום הזה יצאו כל צבאות יהוה מארץ מצרים. ליל שימורים הוא ליהוה, להוציאם מארץ מצרים הוא הלילה הזה ליהוה שימורים לכל בני ישראל לדורותם. And now we get to the Passover instructions. ויאמר יהוה אל משה ואהרון זאת חוקת פסח כל נכר לא יאכל בו וכל עבד איש מתנת כסף ומלטה אותו אז יאכל בו ותושב ושכיר לא יאכל בו ובית אחד יאכל לא תוציא מן הבית מן הבשר חוצה עצם לא תשברו בו כל עשו אותו וכי יגור איתך גר ועשה פסח יהוה הימו לו כל זכר ואז יקרא לעשות והיה כאזרח הארץ וכל ערל לא יאכל בו. And of course, this is often misinterpreted to say that if a ger circumcises himself, he becomes like a native-born Israelite. But this is not correct. This is a disgusting misnomer that's actually carried out by a number of Qaraites who know better. And really what this is saying is that when a ger circumcises himself, yes, he becomes like Ezach Ha'aretz, but not in general, with respect to the laws of the Passover. Right? It says here, okay? One second. Yeah, Ben Nechal Lo Yachal Bo. So it gives all the different classes of who can and who cannot eat of it, right? Okay. Right, and here it says Torah Chad Yi'el Ezach Uleger Hagar B'Chem. So this is not a general statement. This is a statement with regards to the Passover sacrifice, right? Because Torah does not mean a general. Torah does not mean all of the Torah as we call it. It means a specific set of instructions, and the context here is the instructions relating to the Passover sacrifice. I just want to read these verses again and just parse them in my own head again, because each time I do, I learn something new. So I'm going to go back to verse 43 very briefly and start reading from there. Yomer Yehovah el Moshe ve'Aaron zot chukat Pasach kol ben nechar lo yochal bo v'chol eved ish yaknat kasef ומלטה אותו, אז יאכל בו. תושב ושכיר לא יאכל בו. בבית אחד יאכל, לא תוציא מן הבית, מן הבשר חוצה, עצם לא תשברו בו. כל עדת ישראל יעשו אותו, וכי יגור הגר עשה פסח יהוה, הימו לו כל זכר ואז יקרא לעשותו, והיה כאזרח הארץ, וכל ערל לא יאכל בו, עד יהיה לאזרח ולגר Hagar b'tochechem. So anyone who says this is a general statement that there's going to be that the ger becomes like the Ezrach, the ger becomes like the native born, is actually, I think, almost deliberately lying, because there's the context here is clearly within the context of the bringing of the Passover offering and nothing more. Okay. There would be no reason, and the Torah, yes, it does sometimes jump around from topic to topic or do things thematically, right? But there'd be no reason here to assume that it's a general statement about gers becoming Ezrachim. And this is why I'm very against the idea of Qara'im overall, and I don't support Qara'im. And they're given menial labor, so it always implies that they are, as I like to say, I don't like to use the word second-class citizen, although I did in a video that I made, but what I really mean is that they're on the outer concentric circle of the nation of Israel, at least until the end of days. And that's just the way it is. ויעשו כל בני ישראל כאשר ציווה יהוה את משה ואת אהרון כן עשו. ויהי בעצם היום הזה הוציא יהוה את בני ישראל מארץ מצרים על צבאותם. Okay, that's Exodus 12. Exodus 13, and so here we're going down to verse 16. Verse 1, וידבר יהוה אל משה לאמור, חדש לי כל בכור פטר, כל רחם בבני ישראל, אדם ובהמה לי הוא. So every firstborn is sanctified to Yehovah. And of course, we saw that the firstborn in Egypt, the firstborn that were killed, were not just the human beings, but the animals as well. Verse 3, ויאמר משה אל העם, זכור את היום הזה אשר יצאתם ממצרים מבית עבדים, כי בחוזק יד הוציא יהוה אתכם מזה, ולא יאכל חמץ. היום אתם יוצאים בחודש האביב, והיה כי אביך יהוה אל ארץ כנעני, הייתי ועברי והחיובי והיבוסי אשר נשבע לאבותיך, לתת לך ארץ זבח חלב ודבש, ועבדת את העבודה בחודש הזה. Verse 6, 7 ימים תאכל מצות, ביום השביעי חג ליהוה. מצות יאכל את 7 הימים, ולא יראה לך חמץ, ולא יראה לך שאור בכל גבוליך. הגעת לדינך ביום ההוא לאמור, בעבור זה עשה יהוה לי. יצאתי ממצרים. או ידך ולזיכרון בין עיניך. למען תהיה תורת יהוה בפיך, כי בידך הוציאך יהוה ממצרים. שמרת את החוקה הזאת למועדה מימים. Boy, that's a lot to say there. Verse 11, והיה כי הביאה יהוה אל ארץ הכנעני, כאשר נשבע לך לאבותיך ונתנה לך. Verse 12. ועברת כל פטר רחם יהוה, וכל פטר של בהמה אשר יהיה לך זכרים ליהוה. כל פטר חמור תפתה בשה, אם לא תפתה בערפתו, וכל בכור אדם בבניך תפתה. והיה כי ישאלך בנך מחר לאמור מה זאת, ואמרת אליו, בחוזק יד הוציאנו יהוה ממצרים מבית עבדים. Verse 15, ויהי כי הקשה פרעה ישלחנו ויהרוג יהוה כל בכור בארץ מצרים, מבכור אדם עד בכור בהמה. על כן אני זובח ליהוה כל פטר רחם זכרים בכל בכור בני אפתה. והיה לאות על ידכם ולטוטפות בין עיניכם, כי בחוזק יד הוציאנו יהוה ממצרים. So we have this phrase here, יהלך לאות על ידך ולזיכרון בין עיניך. Referring to the totafot. And here we have a very similar phrase. In fact, we can use it to understand that the totafot is somehow a zikaron, perhaps. Although they usually translate it as frontlets, or maybe it's jewelry. And anyway, an amulet. So this is now referring to the redemption of the firstborn is also an ot and a zikaron or totafot. Okay, and that's it. That's the end of the parsha. So where do we go from here? I think for myself, what I'd like to do now is actually read it again. So I could either do that by myself, or I could just do it online. Well, certainly wouldn't hurt to do it online. I'm just going to do it again online. I'm just going to read through it again. There's just so much to assimilate there that I feel like I would like to read through it again. And because we did a lot of analysis before, that's the best thing to do. So I'm just going to read through it one more time. And then we'll probably end the study. And maybe I'll do a little bit more analysis this time if there's something I feel like I want that I have to say. In fact, maybe I'm going to go back to, no, I'm not going to go back to here. I'll start here. Okay. So back in Exodus 10, verse 1, ויאמר משה, בוא אל פרעה, כי אני הכבדתי את ליבו ואת לב עבדיו, למען שיתי אותותיי אלה בקרבו. This word we've seen a number of times now. Sheet. I just want to get the context again. Right, we got it last week. In Exodus 7:23. Oops. יפן פרעה בו אל ביתו ולא שת ליבו גם לזאת. Oh, what's going on? Okay. This is one of the words, it's not used too much in modern Hebrew, so I like to get more of a handle on it by looking at where it appears and understanding it more through context. So the first place it appears in Genesis chapter 3:15. And this is the story of the snake. Or we should say the punishments. God rains at him. Wow, nice one. Verse 14, ויאמר יהוה אלוהים אל הנחש, כי עשית זאת ארור אתה מכל הבהמה ומכל חיית השדה על גחונך. תלך ועפר תאכל כל ימי חייך. Verse 15, איבה, a sheet will put בינך ובין האישה ובין זרעך ובין זרעה, הוא ישובך ראש ואתה תשופנו עקב. So a sheet is like put, to set. That's the way they translate it. One more. ידע אדם עוד את אשתו, ותלד בן ותקרא את שמו שת, כי שת לי אלוהים זרע אחר תחת הבל, כי הרגו קין. So this verb lashit, shat, is the underlying root of the word Seth. And I'll just do a translation of this. Yada Adam od et ishto, and Adam knew his wife again. Ben, and she gave birth to a son. Watikra et shemo, and she named. It's interesting that Eve is the one naming the son, not Adam. Watikra et shemo Shet, and she called his name Seth. Hishat li Elohim zera, because God has put a seed for me. Another seed for me. Has placed another seed for me. Tachat hevel ki harogu kayin. In place of Abel, because he killed, because Cain killed him. And Cain's gone, right? Cain's na'avanad is wandering the earth. Okay, maybe one more. Genesis 30:40. And 30:40 says, okay, so this is the story where Fasim ifrid Yaakov yiten penei atzon el akod. So this is where Yaakov does this kind of magical trick, shall we say? Well, I don't like to use the word magic trick, magical trick, but he does this thing with the flocks, so that increases his herd and defeats Lavan's herd. כבשים הפריד יעקב ויתן פני הצאן אל עקוד וכל חום צאן לבן ושת לו עדרים לבדו. So he placed those flocks by themselves. Placed, set. Okay. One more. Genesis 41:33. ועתה ירא פרעה איש נבון וחכם להשיתהו על ארץ מצרים. So this is the advice that Joseph gives to Pharaoh. Of course, he realized at that point that Pharaoh is basically making a job for himself. Pharaoh appoints him. The ultimate rags to riches story, Joseph, right? So, Yata Yare Pharaoh Ish Navon V'Chacham. So let Pharaoh seek out a understanding and wise person. Why Yashitehu al Eretz Mitzrayim, and place him over the land of Egypt. Okay. In Genesis 46:4. So this is where Yehovah speaks to Yaakov. It says, Anochi ered imcha Mitzrayma, I will go down with you to Egypt. Anochi ale gam ala, and I will certainly come back up, certainly bring you back up, is the context, but come back up. Yosef yashit yado al einecha, and Yosef will place his hands on your eyes, meaning Yosef will close your eyes when you die. And on and on and on. Okay. So that gives us an idea of this word lashit. Again, a word which for me is one of those words which I see in the Torah, but it's not so common in modern Hebrew, so I kind of pass it by. Maybe it has a two-letter root, you know. So I did want to understand it a bit more. So then, going back to here, ויאמר יהוה אל משה בוא אל פרעה, כי אני הכפעתי את ליבו ואת לב עבדיו למען שיתי אותותיי אלה בקרבו. So now we can clearly translate this as Yahweh said to Moses, "Come to Pharaoh, because I have hardened, I have made his heart heavy, and part of his servants, in order that I should place my signs in his midst. ולמען תספר בעשי בנך בן בנך את אשר התעללתי במצרים, in order that you should tell in the ears of your son and your son's son." And notice it mentions the males here, your son and your son's son. Now you could say, oh, well, bincha means son and daughter. It's general for child. And your children's children. But really, because it says ben bincha, it's clearly speaking about the male line, right? Those are the ones that really need to be told the story of Egypt. Et asher italalti b'Mitzrayim, which I pulled off in Egypt. Et otatai asher samti bam, and my signs which I placed in them. Yadatem ki ani Yehovah, and you shall know that I am Yehovah. Right? This whole idea of the plagues being signs that through which everyone knows who Yehovah is. Remember, his name was just revealed, right, to Moses at the burning bush. Right? So now his name is to be proclaimed. His name is to be made known to Egypt, to Israel, and to anyone else who hears. And these signs and these wonders are the means by which Yehovah, using his name first revealed recently, his real name is now going to reveal himself. This is like his, his coming out party, right? They do it, the debutantes, right? When they the Sweet 16s, I think they still have it in some places in the United States, right? And these coming out parties where a young woman is introduced to society and is eligible now for marriage. So, Yehovah, this is his way of, this is his first major entrance, using his name, using his true identity, his new identity. Well, not new, but true identity. He's now having this coming out party, and his coming out party is going to be, making a big name for himself, a big splash, making his name known all over. Okay, verse 3. ויבוא משה ואהרון אל פרעה, ויאמרו אליו, כה אמר יהוה אלוהי העברים, ויבוא משה ואהרון אל פרעה, ויאמרו אליו, כה אמר יהוה אלוהי העברים. So now Moses and Aaron are going to Pharaoh, and they're using again the name Yehovah. In fact, this is the only name they use from now on, pretty much. I don't think El Shaddai is ever used again. Ad Matai, or El Elyon, or anything like that. Ad Matai, Anta le'anot bipanai. One second. Ad Matai, Anta le'anot bipanai. Shalach Ami, Ya'avduni. One second here. I will be right back. Sorry about that. Again, there are things going on around me, so. Okay. Verse 4. כי אם מאין אתה לשלח את עמי, הנני מביא מחר הרבה בגבולך, הרבה as locusts. וישא את עין הארץ, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ. A second here. וישא את עין הארץ, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ. לאכל את יתר הפליטה הנשאר מן הברד, לאכל את כל העץ הצומח לכם מן השדה. מעלו בתיך, בתי כל עבדיך ובתי כל מצרים, אשר לא ראו תיך ואבות אבותיך מיום היותם על האדמה עד היום הזה. ויפן ויצא מעם פרעה. Verse 17. ויאמרו עבדי פרעה אליו, עד מתי יהיה זה לנו למוקש? שלח את האנשים, עבדו את יהוה אלוהיהם. הטרם תדע כי עבדה מצרים. I'll look at this word a little bit. This word is often used in a way it's a bit difficult to understand. So let's look at this word terem. So, right, this is Genesis 2. Well, we don't have to go through each one. The various verses. טרם כי לה דבר, אני טרם אחרי דבר. תברך אחד נפשי בטרם אמות. Okay. I don't think we have to go through it in any great detail. טרם תדע כי עבדה מצרים. So in this case, it would be, do you not yet, is it before you know? Ki Abda Mitzrayim, do you not yet know that Egypt has been destroyed? And this is after, of course, the plague of the hail, before the plague of the locusts. Verse 8, Vayishav et Moshe et Aaron el Paro. ויאמר עליהם, לכו עבדו את יהוה אלוהיכם. מי ומי ההולכים? Verse 9. ויאמר משה, בנערינו ובזקנינו נלך, בבנינו ובבנותינו, בצאננו ובבקרינו נלך, יהוה לנו. יאמר עליהם, יהי כן יהוה עמכם כאשר אשלח אתכם ואת צאתכם, ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. לא כן, לכו נא הגברים עבדו את יהוה, כי אותה הם מבקשים, ויגורש אותם מאת פני פרעה. So let's try to understand this a little bit more. It's a kind of a difficult sentence to parse. Verse 10. יאמר עליהם יהי כן יהוה עמכם. So far says it be so. And God be with you. אתכם ואת צאתכם. As I send you and your little ones, ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. See, I'm not getting that one. I'd like to look at some English translations on that one. Let's kick it off with the NIV. And that was verse 10. Exodus 10:10. See, NIV translates it as, the Lord be with you. If I let you go along with your women and children, clearly you are bent on evil. If I let you go along with your women and children, clearly you are bent on evil. Let's now go back to the Hebrew. יאמר עליהם, יהי כן יהוה עמכם, כאשר אשלחכם צאתכם, ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. Oh, okay, I think I got it now. All right. I want to look at one or two more translations, and then I will render my own. So that's Exodus 10:10. Let's look at the Shokin Bible, Everett Fox. It's up a little bit. Exodus 10:10. Whoa. And Everett Fox says, he said to them, may Yahweh be thus with you, the same as me to send you free along with your little ones. You see, yes, your faces are set towards ill. Well, that's kind of a confusing translation. Yahweh be thus with you. I think I understand that less than I originally understood the Hebrew. The same as I mean to send you free along with your little ones. Okay, I'm going to skip that translation. Let's look at Robert Alter's translation of Exodus 10:10. Okay. Click on this. Yes, we can. Exodus 10:10. And he said to them, may the Lord be with you. The way I will send you off with your little ones, for evil is before your faces. That doesn't make much sense either. An explanation on that, on how he's translating that one. The effect is sarcasm. That is, as much as I am prepared to send off your ones, may the Lord be with you, which is not at all. Interesting translation. It just goes to show with all we have three very different translations that it's not such a clear verse. It really is not clear what it's saying there. For evil is before your faces. These words are ambiguous. The most likely meaning is you are headed for mischief, i.e. embark on a scheme with all that you face, but it could also mean something like harm is going to befall you. Some commentators have detected in the word for mischief, harm, evil, ra'ah, upon the name of the Egyptian deity Ra. Okay, let's look at that. So Robert Alter does an interesting thing with it. May the Lord be with you the way I would send you off with little ones. In other words, it's a sarcastic statement. So first of all, the thing to point out is that this is a very ambiguous kind of verse. Yomer alehem yi chen yoa imachem kasher eshalech etchem tapchem ru'u ki ra'a yetnechem. I don't think Robert Alt. I think it's an interesting translation, but I personally don't think, because I don't usually see that kind of sarcasm used. That's in the Torah, not like that. It's almost like a more modern thing, I think. And he does point out that for evil is before your faces. These words are ambiguous. The most likely meaning is you are headed for mischief, maybe, i.e., embarked on a scheme to escape living slaves. But it could also mean something like harm is going to befall you. Sometimes blah blah blah. Okay. I actually think this translation here is that I've seen, or the one I would the most, is NIV. Is that Pharaoh said, "The Lord be with you. If I let you go along with your women and children, you are bent on evil." There's a little footnote here. Or be careful, trouble is in store for you. Right. So again, point here is an ambiguous verse. Nobody knows what it's really saying. But I think I agree with the NIV's translation the most. So let's try. Let me render my own translation based on that one. And he said, so Pharaoh said to them, Moshe and Aaron, let it be. So I think that this is clearly Yechen is Pharaoh exceeding. He's saying, yes, okay, let it be. Yehovah Yechem, and may God be with you. So he's kind of, remember, Pharaoh's a very confused, he's torn. I don't want to say torn because that like gives almost like lofty or noble kind of intentions to him, like he's debating something internally. No, he's he's pulled to both sides. He's pulled to both sides. He, on the one hand, doesn't want to do any of this stuff, and on the other hand, his country is being destroyed around him, so he's pulled to both sides. The battery's going to go dead soon, so I'm going to end the study after this verse. So I think this is representative of that. On the one hand, he's saying yes, he's saying okay, and then suddenly he's changing his mind. We see that throughout, right? That Pharaoh kind of says something and suddenly changes his mind, right? Even after he lets the Israelites go, he sends his army after them to get them back, right? He's not stable, right? The situation is maybe he was already psychologically unstable, but he's very unstable. He's constantly saying things and then contradicting right away. So I think that's what's going on here. And he said to them, so be it. May Yehovah, and so be it, period. May Yehovah be with you, period. And then, but, I think there's an implied but there. But wait a second. I would do that. In other words, maybe the implication there is I would like to do that, So be it. And may God be with you. But wait a second here. But if I send you and your little ones, ru'u, so up there is clear, see, that evil is literally evil is before your faces. Evil is in front of you. So I think that what he's saying there is you're up to no good. Okay, so so I think Robert Alter's explanation is actually incorrect. I don't think there's any sarcasm here implied. Everett Fox's translation, I don't understand what the heck he's saying, quite frankly. And then the NIV translation, I think, is actually the best, or the closest to the way I would translate it. And I think that's what's going on here. It's Pharaoh contradicting himself, as he often does. There's no surprise here. He constantly contradicts himself. Okay? So I'm sorry. Okay? And he said, I'll give one last translation, then we'll move on to the next verse, and then end the study in a minute. And he said to them, so be it. Right? They requested everybody go out to the desert. So he says, so be it, and may God be with you. But wait a second. But if I send you and your children, your little ones, see, I see, or look, you're up to no good. You're up to evil. Okay, verse 11. Therefore, lochen. So in verse 10 it says yichen, and in verse 11 it says lochen. So it's almost like he's saying, yes, I would gladly let it be that way. Okay, let it be. I would gladly have it that way, but lochen. But obviously, if you're asking for your little ones to go, you're up to no evil. Lochen. Therefore, it should not be that way. Let it not be that way. Lechuna hagvarim. And he uses na, which I think is a kind of a polite, it's often used, but I think here it's interesting that it's used, that the word not is used, because it's kind of a supplicative word. The battery's about to go dead, so I'm really going to end this in a second. I'll just finish this verse. Lochen, lechuna gvarim. Let please just the males go. He's asking almost. He's not saying. Do it Yehovah and worship Yehovah. He ota atem mivakshim. Because that which is ota atem mivakshim yigaresh otam me'et pnei paro. Okay. Do it Yehovah ki ota atem mivakshim. Okay. So let the males go, just the men go, worship God. Because that's really what you're requesting. Okay, you're requesting to worship God. You don't need the children. You don't need the women. You don't need the children. Okay, maybe the flocks, because you've got a sacrifice. But you don't need the they don't participate in the sacrifices, right? So you're up to no good. So let it not be that way. Lochen, right? Again, in verse 10 it says yichen, and verse 11 it says lochen. Let it not be that way. Just let the males go and worship Yehovah, because that's what you really want. That's what you're requesting, to worship Yehovah. You only need the males. And he, meaning whatever, some unidentified person, or really it's another way of kind of expressing the passive. They were expelled, or they were sent away from Pharaoh. Okay, with that, since my battery is almost dead, I'm going to end this morning study. We're going to pick it up this afternoon. We're going to pick it up this afternoon, and we will take it from there. So, okay. So Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, I let him out. It was enough. Okay. I'm sorry. I let him out. Okay. So we're going to end the study now. Thank you all for joining me. We'll see you this afternoon at the afternoon study. And in the meantime, we all touch shalom. And I'm going to end the study. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.